Good afternoon and welcome to the Committee on Judiciary. It is Monday, March 1st, and I would like to call this meeting to order. Will the clerk please take roll call attendance?
Senator Archambault. Senator Burke.
Here.
Senator Oyer.
Here.
Senator Lombardi.
Here.
Senator Quezada.
Here.
Senator Raptakis.
Here.
Senator Rogers.
Here.
Madam Chair,
Here.
there's 7 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Committee, we have 10 bills on the agenda for hearing this evening. I would like to officially bring forward these bills and request a motion to hold all 10 bills for further study. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. A motion to hold the bills for further study made by Senator Lombardi. May I please have a second?
Second from Senator Rogers.
Thank you, Senator Rogers. Second by Senator Rogers. Mr. Clerk, will you please take a roll call of the vote?
Senator Burke.
Yes.
Senator Oyer.
Yes.
Senator Lombardi.
Yes.
Senator Quezada.
Yes.
Senator Raptakis.
Yes.
Senator Rogers.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
there's 7 in the affirmative and none in the negative.
Thank you very much, and that was unanimous. In an effort to utilize both the sponsors and the public's time more efficiently while conducting these hearings virtually, I will ask each of the sponsors, if they're present, to introduce and explain their bill. And upon conclusion of the sponsor's introduction and explanation, we will take public testimony on each bill. This way, if a member of the public has signed up to testify on more than one bill, they may do so. And I also realize that some of our colleagues are on other committees tonight and have other hearings to attend. With that, I believe the first sponsor to speak on their bill this evening is Senator DiPalma. And that'll be Senate Bill 120, an act relating to motor and other vehicles, accidents, and accident reports.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I will be brief. The bill you have before you tonight, it might seem a little obscure, but the intent of the bill is really consumer protection. Rhode Island is one of only 3 states. The other 2 states are Illinois and Oregon that don't provide collision data, make collision data available to the DOT to available for reports for consumers to access. What does that mean? There's about 35,000 to 40,000 collisions or accidents that happen throughout in the state of Rhode Island for which a police report is made, for which the data is not made available, pushed basically to for third parties to be able to use, and information on that accident or collision to be provided via the many reports that might be out there, whether it's auto check, whether it's Carfax, whether it's an individual trying to get some of the data on a particular vehicle. What does that mean? When we as consumers or our constituents as consumers go to purchase a used vehicle, they could be purchasing one of the 35 or 40,000 vehicles in the state of Rhode Island that might have been in an accident for which that data was not reported and not made available. As I'll reiterate again, public safety captures all that information, but that information is not pushed for third parties to be able to use and capture that information and make that information available to purchasers of that vehicle subsequent to them being sold. With that, Madam Chair, I know there'll be others that will speak in more detail about that, but I ask you to think about it from a constituent perspective. Why is this important? Consumer protection for our constituents. It's data that's already collected. Law enforcement's already collecting it now, whether it's local police, state police. It's making that data available via push mechanism, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, across the state, across the country, and it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, Senator DiPalma. Do any committee members have any questions of Chair DiPalma? I do not see any at this time. Thank you, Chair DiPalma. We appreciate your testimony. Now we'll move to S-120 for public testimony. This is Senator DiPalma's bill on an act relating to motor and other vehicles, accidents and accident reports. I believe we have Chris Neal from Carfax Incorporated on the phone. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Neal.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. Chris Neal, representing Carfax. Today I rise in support of Senate Bill 120 as sponsored by Senator DiPalma. Senate Bill 120 is a straightforward records bill that addresses three main objectives. The first is that it clearly delineates in law the distinction between privileged motorist-reported accident information and police-reported accident information. Second, it ensures that personal information, as already defined in Title 11 and associated with crash reports, shall be privileged and only accessible by involved parties to the crash, their insurer, and their legal representatives. And third, it advances and furthers the already productive policy discussions that we've had with the Department of Transportation and the Governor's Office in making vehicle and event information only from crash reports available. Given our current experience with 47 other states, including neighbors of yours such as Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, we know the importance of vehicle damage event information in protecting consumers' interests. Disclosure of VIN-level, non-personally identifying vehicle and event information is an important tool in promoting informed used vehicle purchases, as customers must be able to assess safety and value considerations prior to making a purchase. As such, I ask for this committee's favorable consideration of Senate Bill 120. With that, I would be happy to stand for any questions. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Do any committee members have any questions of Mr. Neal at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Neal. I appreciate your testimony this evening.
Thank you, Chairwoman Coyne.
Next is Senate Bill number 122. The sponsor is Senator Quezada, an act relating to motor and other vehicles, Comprehensive Community Police Relationship Act of 2015. Senator Quezada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of this bill is to make a board to verify that the police department, people to use data on how the police department makes stops physically in the community of color, who get more, for the many years, we know that many people of color get stopped more often, depending on the car they use, like Toyota, Hondas. Those are the cars that get stopped more because those are usually most of the cars that people of color use, especially youth. And we just want to make a board to prevent discrimination on this kind of event. And this is the purpose of this about this bill.
Thank you.
If anybody has a question.
Yes. Do any committee members have any questions of Senator Quezada? Thank you, Senator. No questions at this time. Thank you very much for your testimony. Steve, would you like to continue on with S-122, which is an act relating to motor and other vehicles, Comprehensive Community Police Relationship Act?
Yes, sure. I'm happy to do that. The ACLU strongly supports this bill. Back in 2015, the General Assembly passed this act. One of the provisions in it was the collection of traffic stop and search information by every police department in the state, and a requirement that there be annual reports reviewing and analyzing the data, providing police responsibility to issue annual reports themselves about what they were doing to address racial disparities that might be shown by the collection of the data. What happened was that the law itself had a 5-year sunset period, so the collection of data requirement in the law actually expired last June. What this bill would do is reinstate that data collection provision, but it would also strengthen some of the reporting requirements. What we and other civil rights organizations found is that as the data has been analyzed really been some gaps in the way the information has been prepared and provided to the public. There have also been gaps in the way police departments themselves have issued their reports indicating what they're doing to address racial disparities. So what this bill does is, besides reinstating the data collection, it puts in some stronger provisions to make sure that the analysis is much clearer than it has been these past few years. It imposes clearer obligations on the police department on what they're supposed to provide after they've analyzed their own data. And we think with those amendments in place, this will make Rhode Island a comprehensive law, much stronger, much better, and provide everybody, the public and police departments, with better information that they can use to help address any racial disparities that the data is showing is occurring in any particular community. With that, I'll get to answer any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Brown on S-122? None at this time. And you have the next bill that we'll hear public testimony on is Senate Bill 122, which is Senator Quezada's, an act relating to motor and other vehicles Comprehensive Community Police Relationship Act of 2015. I believe we have Chief St. Sevier of the Smithfield Police Department on the phone now. Welcome,
Bill
Chief.
122, which is
Hello, Chief St. Sevier here.
An act relating to motor and other vehicles.
Could you mute your, all set, Chief. You may testify.
All right, thank you very much. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify on Senate Bill 122. I'd like to start by providing you with just a little bit of my background. In 1998, as a sergeant, I became the department's first accreditation manager, and it was my responsibility to bring my agency into compliance with over 440 standards established by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, also known as CALEA. And as the accreditation manager, I guided my agency to its initial accreditation award with CALEA in 2001. I currently lead an agency that has been reaccredited by CALEA 6 times since 2001. We were the second agency to receive accredited status from the Rhode Island Police Accreditation Commission, also known as RIPAC, in 2013. And we've been reaccredited twice since then. I lead an agency with an authorized strength of 42 sworn officers. Of the 42, which includes 2 that we have in the police academy, only 8 remember what it was like to work for a police department that wasn't following the accreditation model. Said another way, 81% of our sworn officers have spent their entire careers knowing nothing but doing things the accreditation way. I've had the pleasure of serving as an assessor for CALEA and inspected police departments in Georgia, New York, and Wisconsin to verify their compliance with CALEA standards, and reported to CALEA in cases where those agencies fell out of compliance with the standards. I've served as the chair of RIPAC for 2 terms, and prior to that served as vice chair for 2 terms. This afternoon, I speak as the RIPAC chair, and as someone who has been totally invested in accreditation for over 22 years. And just a sound check. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. I oppose Senate Bill 122 as written. Specifically, I oppose the language found on page 5, lines 24 through 26, which reads, "Any department that has failed to comply with this chapter or whose search data show racial disparities at or above the 95% level of statistical significance shall be barred from seeking or renewing accreditation through any state, or private accreditation agency. Including this language in the bill is a failure to recognize the importance of accreditation, which provides law enforcement with a means to systematically conduct an internal review and assessment of an agency's policies and procedures, and an in-depth review of every aspect of the agency's organization, management, and operations. Including this language in the bill is an all-out refusal to permit law enforcement to show its overall success. I'll say that again. Overall success. CALEA has 459 standards currently. RIPAC has 204 standards currently. The RIPAC standards cover 17 topic areas such as management, work conditions and benefits, professional standards, patrol operations, training, juvenile operations, and evidence in property, just to name a few. Let's be clear, though. Being an accredited law enforcement agency doesn't mean you're perfect. Many great hospitals are accredited. They're not perfect. Many great colleges and universities are accredited. They're not perfect. Being an accredited law enforcement agency does, however, mean that your agency has sent a clear signal to its citizens that you are willing to be assessed, audited, inspected, whatever you want to call it, by individuals outside of the agency to determine whether you are complying with standards enumerated in the CALEA Standards Manual or in the RIPAC Standards Manual. It's all about compliance with existing standards. I can tell you from personal experience as a police officer hired in 1988 when the Smithfield Police Department had no idea what accreditation standards were. The Smithfield Police Department is an entirely different agency today because of accreditation. We are clearly way more professional. We receive way more training. And through an extensive written directive system, we provide our employees with way more guidance on how to do their jobs. So why would anyone want to undo this? Why would the sponsors of this bill want to punish police departments by barring them from being part of a system to make them better? I can tell you that the appearance is that the sponsors of this bill don't want the police to be able to demonstrate their overall performance as a law enforcement agency is worthy of recognition. This bill has the appearance of suppressing police efforts to have success. This bill has the appearance of making sure the police don't look good, even if they are good. What I find most interesting about this language to bar police departments from participating in accreditation is how counterintuitive it is. Accreditation is an existing tool to bring change to law enforcement, keep it updated, and improve accountability. Yet this bill aims to remove that tool from the toolbox entirely. It simply makes no sense. I noted in my intro that this is my second term as the chair of RIPAC. I also know that Christine Crocker, our executive director, is scheduled to testify this afternoon. She and I have never received a call from outside groups or the sponsors of this bill to discuss accreditation, to talk about how we can make the accreditation process better, or maybe even tweak or develop standards that address their concerns. All we got was a sentence in a bill that essentially says you will be punished and forever barred from accreditation if a certain future study report says your data shows racial disparities. There's no desire for collaboration or cooperation in this bill's language as it applies to accreditation. The only desire I see is the desire to delegitimize police efforts to be better through accreditation. Here's another concern. Apparently, as I read the bill, this being barred from accreditation is tantamount to a death sentence. It provides no avenue for re-entry into accreditation. The bill is so blinded by its desire to punish law enforcement that rejoining the pursuit of accreditation isn't even considered. from where I sit, that speaks volumes about the bill's intent. I'd like to bring your attention to a very basic CALEA standard that in order for an agency to be accredited, the agency must comply with it or risk not attaining or losing its accredited status. And here's how it reads. A written directive requires the formulation and annual updating of written goals and objectives for the agency and for each major organizational component within the agency. Established goals and objectives are made available to all agency personnel. I think it goes without saying that this is a best practice for any organization, whether you're a superintendent of schools or the CEO of a giant corporation. Annual goals are essential, and making sure your employees are aware of those goals is also essential. But I, as a police chief, am not required to formulate these goals and objectives and make them available to my employees. My town manager doesn't make me do it. The collective bargaining agreement between the town of Smithfield and the FOP doesn't make me do it. The state of Rhode Island doesn't make me do it. The only thing that makes me do it is CALEA, accreditation. And this is just one example of how the proposed language in this bill is so counterintuitive. By punishing police departments and stripping them of accreditation, this bill actually removes hundreds of obligations derived only from accreditation standards. I believe this is referred to as biting off your nose to spite your face. I'll close by saying that barring the police from accreditation is bad for law enforcement. It's bad for the people that we serve. The Rhode Island Police Accreditation Program opposes this bill as written, and I ask that the committee also oppose it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Do any committee members have any questions of Chief St. Savia? Yes, Senator Archambault.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, welcome to the committee. As always, I appreciate your deep inquiry and your very detailed analysis coming from my hometown and having known you throughout your career. This particular language that you cited, Chief, on page, looks like page 5 near the bottom, the last paragraph in the new proposed language right before the red where it's redacted. Have you thought about what the bill would look like if that language were eliminated entirely? And I say that before you answer with the greatest reverence for CALEA. I recall when even the state police weren't CALEA certified back in the mid-'90s. Remember, we were at Salve, and Tom Svogen, the professor there, the chair of the justice program, was bringing folks in from around the country to help to get this discussion going on CALEA and how to get, and for anyone who doesn't know on the committee, as the chief so aptly said, CALEA really is the benchmark for the highest standards of policing. So it's quite an accomplishment to become CALEA certified, and not all our police departments in the state are CALEA certified. So as the chief said, it really is counterintuitive to lose your certification because of a standard that's put in a bill that I'm not sure was well thought out. I'm not sure where it comes from, and I certainly defer to the chief. He may seem to be reacting a little, zealously here, but I think it's out of an instinct to protect what has been worked so hard for to achieve. So, Chief, back to my question after I got on a little. I'm at home, and those are my dogs. I'm sorry. Little dogs like to bark sometimes, and they jam. So, easy. So, that last sentence, could you amplify on what it would look like if that were out of there?
Well, Senator, I would have to say that my intention in testifying here today was to testify regarding the impact of accreditation, not so much on the bill in its entirety. So I would defer it to the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association's official response on the entire bill. I am obviously extremely concerned about the language that made its way into the bill that deals with accreditation, which it seems to me simply shouldn't be there.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you reaching out and talking about this and all the good work you do. Thank you for coming to testify.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any further questions of the chief? I don't see any at this time. Thank you very much, Chief, for your testimony this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do we have Senator De La Cruz? He's up. Next to testify on the same bill, Senate Bill 122, is Christine Crocker, Executive Director for the Rhode Island Police Accreditation Commission. Good afternoon, Christine. Can you hear me? Welcome to the committee, Christine.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in opposition of this bill, particularly the same language that Chief St. Sauveur has addressed pertaining to accreditation. Accreditation is a voluntary program, and it's a proven management model for agencies to continually assess the way they're delivering services and addressing the needs and concerns of their community. I, like the chief, back in 1999, I was a member of the Cumberland Police Department and saw my agency through its initial CALEA accreditation and 2 following assessments. So I have a long-standing understanding of accreditation and the benefits that it provides to an agency. It's important to note that accreditation is not the panacea, it is not the end-all, be-all, because it doesn't stop things from happening. What it does is focus on what the agency does in response when there are policy violations or a lack of compliance with the standards. I've assessed agencies across the country, all types, airport police, hospital police, and have seen the benefits that it has provided to law enforcement. Back in 2013, the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association wanted to bring an accreditation program to Rhode Island that was accessible and affordable, particularly for the smaller agencies. Shortly after I was hired in 2012, we worked to put together a standards manual of 204 standards, which every agency must comply with. To show you how supportive law enforcement is in Rhode Island in recognizing the need to follow industry-recognized best practices, out of the 47 sworn law enforcement agencies within the state of Rhode Island, 45 are currently members of our accreditation program. The 2 remaining are in the process of joining the association because they see the value and the benefit of accreditation. Currently, 32 agencies are accredited, with several in the wings to be accredited before this year is over. To make people understand as well, this is not a rubber stamp process. It is a grueling review. And if an agency is not in compliance, we do not sign off until they bring that particular policy or standard into compliance. And we come back every 3 years to reassess the agency to ensure they're maintaining compliance. to prove that it is not a rubber stamp, in the 7 years that the program has been in existence, one agency had their accreditation suspended, one agency it was revoked, and several others were given accreditation with conditions which required a follow-up to ensure what they said they would do, they did. It's also strengthened the relationship of law enforcement here in the state. We work together, addressing compliance with the standards, helping each other, developing sample policies. We just recently updated the model use of force policy in partnership with the Trust, the Rhode Island Interlocal Risk Management, that ensures 31 of our member agencies. To show the support and understanding of accreditation, the Trust will increase the deductibles for those agencies that are not accredited or lose their accreditation. It's a risk management tool. $25,000 to $75,000 per incident cost to the municipality if it is not accredited. As Chief St. Sever said, to prohibit an agency from seeking or retaining accreditation goes against everything that we're looking for related to police reform. This is a monitoring system, and we all work together to ensure we're holding each other accountable to these standards. I think it would be a travesty to prohibit agencies from seeking or retaining their accreditation as it is written in this bill. As I said, it is not the panacea. It will not stop things from happening, but it is how the agency reacts when it does. It provides those tools. And like Chief St. Sever, when I joined law enforcement in 1986, we didn't have a policy manual. And it was based on common sense and who was in charge on how we functioned. Because of accreditation, we have uniform policies and procedures throughout the state. So I oppose this language as it is in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do any of the senators, committee members have any questions of Ms. Crocker? I don't see any at this time. Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I believe next up is Mr. Mike Avora from the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights to speak on this Bill 122. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Avora.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You can begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you and weigh in on this most important bill. I am the executive director of the State Commission for Human Rights, and I have been involved in efforts to address racial profiling since the late 1990s here in Rhode Island, and have come before you again seeking, as Steve Brown pointed out in his testimony, to support a bill which I think makes much-needed improvements and tweaks to the Community Police Relationship Act. It seeks to amend certain sections of the CCPRA, and I think the important thing to focus on here is that it would increase transparency and accountability, and it would establish more uniformity in data reporting and allow for community input and review at various phases of the data collection and the reporting process. One of the good things that the bill does is it would call for the continuation, as Steve Brown pointed out, of data collection, even absent the ability to for the state to actually fund analysis of that data. I know that the state is dealing with some very real fiscal concerns right now, but I would hate to see the data collection process stop, even if it can't be analyzed for years. I think that continuous collection and retention of that data is really paramount. One of the other things that the bill does is it provides that if and when a study is actually commissioned and conducted, it would require analysis at both the 85% and 95% confidence levels. This is important, members of the committee, because what we saw with the last study that was done as a result of the 2015 bill is that it was only reported at the 95% confidence level. The industry standard is 85%. I don't think that that's in dispute. What has happened with this past several years' reports is that because they used the higher confidence level, I believe it left all departments except those with the most egregious disparities free from any level of secondary review. One of the other things that the bill would do is establish uniform reporting criteria. Again, Steve Brown spoke on this, so I won't delve into it. What I'd like to move to is the provision that seems to be the lightning rod given the testimony so far, and that's the sentence which seeks to link compliance with the chapter with the ability to seek and renew accreditation. I would emphasize that if the requirements of this law are to be taken seriously, there have to be consequences. I also want to just push back a bit on what the chief said. If I heard him correctly, what he said was that this language is tantamount to a failure to appreciate the importance of accreditation. And my one pushback on this is that, the counter position is that not taking this bill seriously indicates a failure to appreciate the importance of compliance with the law. It's a failure to appreciate the importance of bias-free policing. But having said that, I would hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I'd hate for a bill which seeks to accomplish so many great things in a decades-long effort to identify and address racial profiling. I'd hate for it to die in the vine because of one sentence, and I think that compromise is possible, as one of the senators alluded to earlier. Lastly, I would just emphasize one of the really important, for me as a community member and as the head of the Commission for Human Rights, an important section, which is that it seeks to create a community review board. And I think that community involvement in this area is central to establishing transparency and accountability. Historically, community members really haven't been involved in this effort beyond at this phase when draft legislation is being contemplated. And then typically they don't have a voice in the process until it's time to react or to respond to data analysis reports that come out years later. So I think giving community members more of a voice in the process of analyzing and addressing racial disparities in policing is essential to helping to empower communities, particularly communities of color. But I also think it's important to engage community and law enforcement together at various stages of data collection and analysis and with problem solving in the instances in which disparities are noted. And with that, I conclude my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And also I want to make it very clear that I'm happy to be involved in any way in a dialogue or conversations around tweaking this bill in a way that would make it more pleasing, as it were, to those who spoke and those who may speak or those who've submitted written testimony in opposition. As I said, I would hate for a bill that is this important to the community to suffer the hands of a fate of non-passage simply because of one sentence.
Mr. Avoya, that was music to my ears. Compromise is the key word here. So I appreciate your willingness to work with us on fine-tuning what needs to be fine-tuned, and I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Do any committee members have any questions of Mr. Avora? I see none at this time. Thank you so much for your testimony and for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Before
we jump to our last bill of the evening, I want to bounce back to S-122. We have Sid Wardell on the line. He had to testify in the House and was scheduled to testify on this bill S-122, which is the Act relating to motor and other vehicles, Comprehensive Community Police Relationship Act. Welcome, Sid. Welcome back. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for having to jump back and forth on hearings here and was unable to pick up on the call. And so I do deeply appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kind of give a little more position from the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association on S-122, but also maybe answer a couple of questions. I know Senator Archibald had one that still may be relevant, or hopefully I can answer. First of all, the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association does oppose the bill as written. But with that said, although Michael Vora, I heard him testify, he may have a year or two more in this than I do as far as on the state level of dealing with the studies. I have also been a part of this since very early in the 2000s. So I just wanted to, lay that out there that by all means we want to work with our stakeholders and everyone to get things right and to work on things and be able to work together with those stakeholders. With that, I can tell you that this bill, although it did sunset, or not this bill, but the statute that was in place, but I can tell you every agency in Rhode Island has continued both to collect the data that was required under the previous statute, but is also doing review of that data internally as they have done since the early 2000 and most recently under the 2015 bill. So I want to assure everybody that the data is not going anywhere and that we will and have been continuing to collect that. We have always been a part of the submission of legislation, and I know Chief St. Sever was, passionate about the end of the accreditation portion, and I know he mentioned about not having been contacted on this, and it is troublesome on one level of, in some ways suggesting that partnership has diminished, and I want to say that it hasn't on our end, and we will continue to work with those appropriate stakeholders. There's a couple of things I would like to hit in there, which the bill puts in place now. A part of that is the reporting requirements. When we're looking at statistical information, the first thing that anybody who studies this tells you, you can't look in too much of a fishbowl like looking at 1 month of data. It just doesn't give you that true perspective of what looking at 6 months or even a year of data does. So I would say that some of the reporting things are overly burdensome, and in fact are not going to give you the information that you're really trying to get from that data. Reducing the confidence rate from 95 to 85%. Those are numbers that are put in place by the professionals who are doing these types of analysis. And there's a suggestion there that, that then eliminated some agencies from a review or let them skate under the radar and only looked at the most egregious. Well, I would turn that and say that really what they're doing is the data when they're looking at 95%, that's the accuracy rate. It's not conforming rate, it's the accuracy. And it's how they can statistically say that the information that they're looking at, on how confident they can be about that. All of these studies, which have been previously done, most recently by Central Connecticut State University, and before that Northeastern, these are all independent folks that are doing that. This isn't law enforcement working to come up with some type of an answer. And I understand some frustration that we heard that the public hasn't had the inside seat, so to speak, to look at the data within the agencies. But, that's what that independent agency is there for. And we've participated in those meetings with them. We've participated in follow-ups. And really by the fact that them looking at it, that's the outside in review. And if you could just, I'd just like to take a short paragraph, 4 sentences, that were written into the most recent report, which I think really describes, this isn't an exact science by any means. So in the most recent report, which was a review by agencies, Central Connecticut wrote that the goal of an enhanced analysis in the report is to better understand the reasons for racial and ethnic disparities in traffic stop data. Disparities can be the result of a variety of factors that need to be further explored. And in this section of the report, we take a deeper look at identifying disparities in traffic enforcement. The nature of policing differs from one community to another based on a variety of unique factors. Police administrators must deal with a variety of crime and disorder problems. Traffic stop disparities can be influenced by factors such as location of accidents, high calls for service in high volume areas, high crime rate areas, and areas with major traffic generators such as shopping centers and entertainment districts, to name a few. Police administrators make decisions about how to effectively deploy police resources based on needs of the community. So that's the reason that when there's an analysis done and there's need for a deeper dive, that's when the company that's doing that, or in this case the university, comes in and does that analysis. They're looking, because the one thing you didn't hear is all of this data, the one thing that it's based on is census data. Well, census data, and we've argued for years that there needs to be a study done on driving population, because we certainly know, and many of you live, not in Providence, on the outskirts, and you know that in the summertime there's a higher population, there's stuff going to the beaches. So we need to have a look. If we're really going to do this correctly, we've got to look at what the driving population, not just who lives in the community. And one of the things that they came out with, like in North Smithfield, was that there's about 12,000 people. I believe the population is there. They came up with rates of disparity in traffic stops. But then they went and they looked at some of the stores and the places that are there, the shopping centers. And they found that Walmart had 7,000 people on an average day go into Walmart. Well, not everybody from North Smithfield's going to Walmart. We know they're coming from other areas. So we strongly suggest that if we're going to do this again, which we're certainly standing behind, that there has to be other factors that we can use to make a determination on what is really the driving population for any particular area. And as it's always been stated, any disproportionate type of stops does not equal racial bias. We've seen that most recently through COVID and other areas, that we have disparities in how our healthcare system and other things are working. I don't think there's an intent by anybody or a suggestion that somebody is doing that to disparage anybody of another race. I'm not saying it's appropriate, and I'm not saying we don't need to find the answers, but the suggestion is that law enforcement is intentionally doing it, but in other places, it's a part of, how our system has been working. And clearly, areas that need to be worked on.
I believe Senator Archambault has a question for you.
Certainly. Yes, Senator.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. My hand was up in the little box there. Sid, you're doing a fine job. I'm sorry. I should have taken my hand down from the little box. I'll lower my hand. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Sid, you can continue.
Madam, thank you. So there are just for a couple other portions, and I'll certainly finish up. As I was stating, that disproportionate stops does not equal racial bias. They can't come with those statements, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking at it. But one of the things that this bill also does is take those analysis and then turns them and allows them what would be used and could be used in a criminal case. We've always been against that. I don't think it's an appropriate place to do. You certainly can't get in somebody's mind on why and what they're doing, but that's where, again, the accreditation piece comes into play, and how law enforcement, I don't think anybody's more critical on themselves than law enforcement, and that's why accreditation works so well. That's why so many agencies are doing it, is because it is that independent and outside look. So I'll finish up with the other piece to this about what I'm going to call is the Gutcha Clause, and that is that if any portion of this bill is not met by an agency, then the restrictions that go into place, such as accreditation. And I don't think that those types of clauses that go in do anybody any benefit, and certainly not to help law enforcement better serve the public. So if there are any questions, I certainly would welcome them.
Thank you, Sid. Do any committee members have any questions at this time? I think we're good for now. Thank you so much for your testimony and for rejoining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
And our bill number 128 is next, sponsored by Senator Reptakis. Senator, would you like to proceed with the introduction and explanation of your bill, which is an act relating to criminal offenses, children, confinement in motor vehicles prohibited?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is a bill that we've had in this committee for the last, I would say, last 7 years. We did pass this bill several times out of committee, did end up passing the floor, but ended up dying in the House of Representatives. This year, I simplified the bill. I am not touching at all the statute, the current statute, which is 11-9-5, which is cruelty or neglect of a child. What I've done in the another chapter, 3122-2.1, is taking away the word verbal warning. We need to allow our law enforcement, our first responders, discretion, and I want to use that word very clearly, discretion, allowing those that come upon the scene to make that determination. So there's no need to handcuff our first responders in law enforcement by having that word verbal warning. If we have an animal in a vehicle under extreme conditions, whether it's cold or hot temperatures, there is so many penalties, misdemeanors charged, monetary penalties. But leaving a child in a vehicle by having this statute in place, what this does, it just gets rid of the statute where it only ties the hand of law enforcement by issuing only a verbal warning. So my intent is to leave the current statute, the prior statute, 11-9-5, in its place that already has in law the penalties that law enforcement can use. And look, a police department can charge. It goes through a judicial process, and if the judge sees that the penalties are too tough or extreme, a judge has discretion. So we should allow our law enforcement and first responders also to have that discretion. So I'm making the bill this year simple. It's a one-page bill. It just deletes the warning, a verbal warning. And I think it's very unfair that law enforcement has their hands tied. We've had an incident just recently on January 18th where we had two individuals that left a 14-month-old baby in a vehicle, unattended, unlocked, in extreme cold temperatures. So I think we should send a strong message to those that do not care, that decide to go gambling, that decide to go shopping, and leave a child unattended, especially a child under the age of 7 years, in a vehicle. So with that, Madam Chair, and conclude my testimony.
Thank you, Senator Reptakis. Do any committee members have any questions of the senator? I do not see any at this time. Thank you, Senator Reptakis. Now we'll go to bill number S-128. That's by Senator Reptakis, an act relating to criminal offenses, children, confinement in motor vehicles prohibited. I believe we have Terry Sullivan on the phone. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
You may begin your testimony.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and members of the committee for letting me speak tonight about this bill. I know last time I neglected to say who I was, so a little bit about me. My name is Terry Sullivan. I've been married to the same man for 32 years. We have 6 children. I've been a registered nurse for 34 years with the state of Rhode Island. I'm a first responder for almost 2 decades before it was popular to do. I'm also a Red Cross instructor of CPR, AED, first aid, bloodborne pathogens. So I've done my research on this bill, which I've been presenting with the help of the good people down there for almost a decade now, trying to get this passed. Rhode Island is the only, well, there's one other state besides Rhode Island that does not have anything on the books for leaving children alone in cars. Now, you can't leave an animal in the car between April and October, but there's nothing on the books about a person. This has to change. I'm sorry, but it really does. With everything going on and everybody not paying attention to what's going on, I understand the stresses of everything right now. With me being a COVID nurse, I am stressed also. We're forgetting things. God forbid if a child is forgotten in a car. Their metabolism is up to 5 times faster than ours, and they can actually get heat stroke in a car in temperatures as low as 60 degrees. So, you know, the nice weather is coming. It's going to break, and I cannot. I can't even fathom something happening to a child. Like I said, I have 6 of my own, and I never ever left them in a car. And I probably look like who knows what, going into the store with a car seat hanging on each arm, a child hanging on each car seat, and then one hanging on my belt and the other one in front of me leading the way saying, don't go anywhere. I could just imagine what I looked like, but things happen in a split second, and anybody on that panel who's a parent knows that. The minute you're not looking, something happens. It can happen even when you are looking. You know, if you Google anything about a child being left in a car, the horrific things that are going to come up, it's just awful. And people, they're still today, you would think they were common sense not to do it, and they're still doing it. Look at Burlington Tote Factory. Look at Cumberland Farms. It happened in Walmart 3 times. Someone left a 4- and 6-year-old in there for an hour and a half at 7:30 at night. I mean, somebody left a 6-month-old in the car to go shopping at Rentham. I don't know. Common sense apparently is out the window, so there needs to be some kind of accountability, which is what is lacking right now. Nobody seems to have any. Everything is somebody else's fault. No, this is your child. You need to have accountability for this child. You decided to have this child. You need to keep this child safe. I'm sorry. I get a little...
It's okay.
I don't know if it's the nurse or the mom in me, but I get a little emotional with this. I can't see anything happening to a child that can be prevented. Sorry. Sorry.
It's okay. It is emotionally charging, and I appreciate your passionate testimony. Do any of the members of the committee have any questions of Ms. Sullivan at this time?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Senator Raptakis.
Yep, I just want to commend Ms. Sullivan. She's been working passionately on this issue, being a nurse, like she said, for many years, having children. But this doesn't stop, and it's not only the hot weather. I just want to add to Ms. Sullivan's testimony, it's the cold weather. We had incidents back this past January where the temperatures were about 27 degrees Fahrenheit, especially the Burlington Coat Factory incident that took place, I believe it was in Warwick or Cranston. So enough's enough. I mean, we really want to get tough. We get tough on other crimes, like Ms. Sullivan said, leaving animals in a vehicle, those operators get penalized. But to handcuff individuals, and especially on the current statute, the last sentence, sentence 9, says that police officer can't even record or report the incident to DCYF. So this law really handcuffs law enforcement and first responders. That's why it should be totally repealed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions of the witness? No other questions at this time. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan, for your testimony. The next sponsor that I believe is on the line right now to testify is Senator Calkin, Senate Bill number 135, an act relating to state affairs and government corrections department. Senator Calkin, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. I introduced this legislation back in 2018. I'm introducing it again, and it's actually become more timely. So this act would prevent the director of the Department of Corrections from restricting in-person visitation of inmates in the event that the department implemented electronic visitation between inmates and visitors. The implementation of electronic video visitation started a few years back, and now recently with COVID-19 has been the way to connect families and to keep them safe. However, once the pandemic is over, we need to ensure that in-person visitation is protected. There was a report done by the U.S. Department of Justice, National Institute of Corrections, on video visiting in corrections, and they state the following. Studies confirmed that incarcerated individuals have better outcomes when they receive in-person visits from family and supportive community members. Specifically, traditional in-person visiting has been found to benefit both corrections and incarcerated individuals by reducing behavioral infractions and violent behavior among the incarcerated, lowering recidivism and increasing public safety, facilitating planning and support for community reentry, increasing the chance of obtaining gainful employment post-release, reducing the likelihood of using illegal substances post-release, maintaining and strengthening the parent-child relationship, and reducing the trauma that children experience when they are separated from a parent. Some of the issues relating to video visitation that is also documented in this report: families may lack resources to own a computer and/or to have an internet connection. Families are dissatisfied with the systems that have technical problems, poor video and audio quality, and poor camera angles. The technology may be confusing for the incarcerated and visitors, especially those with developmental delays and individuals that lack computer skills. Video visiting is difficult for individuals with visual and/or hearing impairments, and fees charged for video visiting may be unaffordable. So what are some of the impacts of mandatory video visitation? According to Grassroots Leadership, a national civil and human rights organization that's based in Texas that works for a just prison system, they report there was a correlation between the removal of in-person visitation and an increase in disciplinary infractions. In one report, they documented disciplinary infractions at Travis County Jail increased from 820 in May of 2012 to 1160 in April of 2014, so quite an increase. Additionally, there was a 20% increase in inmate assaults due to removal of in-person visitation. According to prisonpolicy.org, the for-profit video calling industry has been quietly sweeping the nation, state, prison, and county jails. Unfortunately, in order to stimulate demand for their low-quality products, jails and video calling companies often work together to shut down traditional in-person visitation rooms and instead require families to pay up to $1.50 per minute for visits via computer screen. With some notable exceptions, video technology is poorly designed, does not work well, and makes a trying time for families even more challenging. So now with coronavirus, we've all been doing the Zoom thing and other video types of calls, and have experienced how difficult they can be, and also how impersonal they are. Now imagine if you were a child and you can't see your parent for 5 or 10 years and are only able to see them on a tiny screen. Video visitation is a $1.3 billion industry financed by the fees families pay. Unfortunately, 1 in 3 families go into debt trying to stay in touch, according to a Vice News report. The Rhode Island Department of Corrections has implemented video visitation systems since the last time I introduced this bill with Securotech, I guess, and charges families $5 for a 20-minute call. The legislation here today is an attempt to be proactive to ensure that in-person visitation is protected, not only for all of the benefits to families, inmates, and the community, but also in protecting them from a growing industry that is looking to profit on a very vulnerable group. And now that Rhode Island has one of these systems in place, we need to ensure now that the contract does not prohibit in-person visitation like has been done in many other states like California and Texas, that are now having a hard time fighting to get back in-person visitation. So given the timeliness of this issue, I hope that you will consider moving it for passage soon. Thank you very much for your time, and open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Senator, for your testimony. We appreciate it. Do any committee members have any questions of Senator Coleman right now? Thank you, Senator. I don't see any questions. Thank you. I believe we have now Senator Acosta on the line. Senate Bill number 182, entitled An Act Relating to Public Records Access. Senator Acosta, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee for being here today and for hearing on this bill. Senate Bill 182 is pretty simple. It's one page, as you see it in front of you. In its essence, it's about transparency, accountability, and the delivery of high-quality service to our residents. So the origin of this bill is that I had a conversation with a constituent of mine who has had several negative interactions with members of our state or municipal bureaucracies, and has reported difficulty in being able to ascertain the information that they would need in order to hold them accountable, to place a report, to file a complaint. And so what this bill does is, if in the course of your duty you are asked your name and your position, you would have to disclose that. There are several agencies that already do this, so most notably our law enforcement agencies do this as standard operating procedure. All that this bill would do would make it so that any of our public employees would be accountable in the same way. And so that if you were to ask somebody what their name and position was, they would need to disclose that to you, so that you could either hold them accountable or thank them for their service and let their supervisor know what a great job they did. So I'm happy to answer any questions for the members of the committee, and I as I mentioned before, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Senator Acosta. Do any committee members have any questions? Okay, I don't see any at this time. Thank you, Senator, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Next bill is Senate Resolution number 245 by Senator Coleman. It's a Senate resolution creating a special legislative commission to study justice reinvestment proposals and provide recommendations for reducing the incarceration of women. Senator Coleman?
Thank you so much,
Welcome.
Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to come before you tonight to present Senate Resolution 245. I'd like to thank the resolution's co-sponsors, including folks here on this committee, you, Madam Chair, as well as Leader McCaffrey and Senator Quezada. So this is a resolution that creates a study commission on justice reinvestment, and it's focused on the women's facility at the ACI. I think there are a lot of reasons that this is the moment to consider the future of incarceration for women in our state. Here's a few. So the women's facility in Rhode Island is incredibly expensive. It's also poorly matched to the needs of its population. As of January 2021, so 2 months ago, there were only about 80 women incarcerated in the women's facility. The state uses an actual building that was built as a maximum security reintegration center for men as its women's prison. The building isn't appropriate for the purpose that it's being used for, as it lacks programming space, it lacks recreational space. It's much too high a level of security, and it's really expensive. It costs approximately $120,000 annually to incarcerate women in Rhode Island. Compare that to about $60,000 annually for men. That's double. But more to the point, incarcerated women are a really particular demographic. They don't require this high level of security for a number of reasons. About half of them are awaiting trial, so they're not even sentenced yet. Half of those who are awaiting trial are being held on nonviolent offenses, right? So larceny, something like that. And of the women who are currently incarcerated, only 23 of them, just a quarter of them, had sentences that were longer than 3 years. And that means that 3/4 of the women who are being held are serving very short sentences. The vast majority are struggling with addiction and repeated incarceration that comes out of addiction, right? So they need treatment first and foremost. And more to the point, there are really very few reentry programming opportunities for women offenders in our state. For instance, there's no women's reentry housing in the entire state. And this is a particular issue given why most of the women are incarcerated, as we said, usually due to substance abuse disorder and things like that. I want to bring up a couple more things. It's worth noting that the Department of Corrections itself proposed in its fiscal year 21 budget the closure of the women's facility. In that proposal, they moved all individuals out of state. This estimated an average savings of $4.2 million. Imagine the kinds of services that we could offer with that money. But by significantly expanding the diversion and the parole and the reentry programming in Rhode Island, we could think about other options for this facility, right? We could think about more open, secure, non-correctional facilities. We could create a network of halfway houses and transitional houses that supports community-based treatment. But what I think is very clear is that we need to look at this facility, look what we're doing with our money, and see if it's meeting the needs of the community. The study commission itself is the result of many conversations with community members and stakeholders who've all offered their buy-in, including from every participant named in the commission itself. So this would be a collaborative opportunity to revisit our options, consider the needs, and see how we could meet them better. I very much appreciate the committee's consideration. Happy to take questions, and I hope it can be moved out of committee soon.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any committee members who have questions of Senator Coleman? I do not see any at this time. Senator, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining us.
Madam Chair, if I may I be counted as present and in the affirmative on any bills that I may have missed?
Yes, will the clerk record his vote in the affirmative? It doesn't affect the outcome. Thank you, Senator Archambault. The next verbal testimony, I believe, is 245. That's Senator Coleman's Senate resolution creating a special legislative commission to study justice reinvestment proposals and provide recommendations for reducing the incarceration of women. I believe we have Cherie Cruz on the line. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
You may begin your testimony on Senate Bill 245.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Senator Coleman and the co-sponsors of this bill. My name is Cherie Cruz. I'm here in support of passing Senate Bill 245 to create the Special Legislative Commission to study justice reinvestment proposals and provide recommendations for reducing the incarceration of women. I am a fourth-generation Rhode Islander and have survived 3 generations of familial incarceration as a daughter, mother, sister, and myself directly impacted. The current carceral system as it currently exists is anything but just. We have an opportunity presenting us that can put us on a path to begin to heal women and families who are directly impacted by the criminal legal system and incarceration. One that can provide a meaningful and informed process that can work towards benefiting the overall physical, mental, and fiscal health of families and the state as a whole. According to the Rhode Island DOC data, close to 60% of women who are incarcerated are parents, which means these children face forced separations. Forced separations not at the U.S. borders, which are also wrong, but right here in Rhode Island. Women are facing imprisonment and forced family separations for sentences not more often are less than 6 months to a year. This means they are not a safety risk. So then we have to ask why. Why family separations? Why unnecessary traumas inflicted upon mothers, children, and families? Why add this cost burden to the state? Is this ideal of fear and punishment and caging a woman so important that it creates these multi-generational traumas that can last lifetimes? The cost of lost wages to families in the state, increased use of child welfare systems, increased barriers to housing, health care, education, and many more primary and secondary effects of incarceration and involvement in the criminal legal system. So you have to ask why. The cost based on current Rhode Island DOC data states it's an average of over $133,000 to incarcerate a woman annually. With the current state of things, women are losing their children to neglect because they cannot afford a $1,000 monthly rent. These are the same women that find themselves involved with the criminal legal system for so-called crimes of survival, in which in turn cost the state more money. women are not able to find work and quality childcare, which ends up costing the state even more money. This is a ripe opportunity to look at reinvesting those dollars to alternatives to incarceration that work to support women and families that include actually reduce the cost to the state across many governmental agencies and increase the health and well-being of women, children, and families. This commission will provide a foundation to work collaboratively with state legislators, government agencies, and most importantly, those directly impacted to meaningfully look into alternative incarceration that not only can save our state millions in revenue in the short and long run, but also the cost to our state's overall public health. It's time to address this current carceral system and the negative impacts it perpetuates, in which all Rhode Island families are the victims of. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Ms. Cruz, thank you for your testimony. Do any committee members have any questions of Ms. Cruz? I think we're all set. No questions at this time. Thank you, Ms. Cruz, for joining us.
Thank you.
The next witness on the phone to testify on Senate Bill 245 is Mr. Nicholas Stravol. Good afternoon and welcome to the committee.
Thank you. My name is Nicholas Streltsov. I'm a medical student at Brown University, and I'd like to testify in support of Senate Bill 245. Women prisoners are the fastest growing demographic in American jails and prisons, and in Rhode Island we've seen a steady annual increase in the percentage of women prisoners since 2015. While there are numerous benefits of the proposed bill, I'd like to draw attention to the immediate and downstream health effects of reducing the burden of incarceration on women in Rhode Island. Numerous studies from the medical literature have shown that women in jail and prisons have a greater risk for developing chronic health conditions and infectious diseases, even when compared to men in similar settings. The Bureau of Justice Statistics has found that incarcerated women have a higher risk of developing a psychiatric disorder than male prisoners, and there are measurable personal, public health, and financial costs of our current policies that need to be evaluated, as the previous callers so powerfully stated. There are also numerous downstream effects of these policies. We know that the vast majority, up to 64%, are mothers, and for every mother incarcerated in Rhode Island, there are on average 2 children separated from their mother. Children who grow up with a mother in the criminal legal system have a greater risk for incarceration themselves. They also have higher rates of emotional problems and higher risk for academic difficulties and lower achievement. As I'm sure others are aware, the vast majority, in some studies estimate up to 90% of women in jails and prisons are survivors themselves of abuse. The current practices of disproportionately incarcerating poor women, women of color, women with histories of abuse and mental health conditions, clearly these policies are not achieving justice. They are achieving worse health outcomes for vulnerable groups, and I strongly encourage the committee to support the proposed bill. I'm very excited about the possibilities of the proposed bill being the start of that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Do any committee members have any questions? I don't see any questions at this time, but while we have you on the phone, you're also signed up, I believe. Oh, the next person? Okay. I think we're all set. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Nick Horton from Open Doors. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Horton.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee and Senator Coleman for sponsoring the legislation, and Chairwoman Coyne for the opportunity to speak. I am the co-executive director of Open Doors, an agency in Rhode Island that provides services and advocacy to people that have been in prison. We're excited about the conversation and the opportunity from this commission. I just wanted to highlight a couple things that previous witnesses have not testified about. One is the fact that we have long-standing challenges with the system, the prison system surrounding women's incarceration in the state. Namely, at the moment, the facility that we use was built as a men's maximum prison and has been used for several years simultaneously as an awaiting trial facility, as a minimum security prison and a maximum security prison. This means both. It creates a lot of challenges for the women that are there, but also that it is incredibly expensive. On average, we pay around $60,000 to incarcerate a man for 1 year and around $120,000 to incarcerate a woman for 1 year. So we have a very inefficient system, very problematic system. Overall, in Rhode Island, since 2008, the prison population has decreased by 31%, and crime has decreased by 43%, yet our prison budget has gone up by 10%, and the women's prison certainly is contributing to that. As a result of many of these problems, in FY21, RIDOC submitted a proposal as part of its budget to close the women's prison entirely, and in their proposal, they indicated that the women would be moved out of state. Well, our agency certainly doesn't support that as a solution. We feel like this proposal indicates that there is a definite need for an ongoing conversation about this system. Open Doors has also submitted a letter jointly with Amos House, the Center for Health and Justice Transformation, and Roberta Richmond, all who are very interested in this proposal and this conversation. And I just wanted to highlight Roberta Richmond, who is the former warden of the women's prison. She worked at the Department of Corrections for over 30 years, and she's indicated feeling that there are a number of alternatives to incarceration that our state should consider. It would both support women, keep them from reoffending, keep the public safer, and cost less. Thank you for your time.
Do any committee members have any questions of Mr. Horton on Bill 245? And our final bill that we will hear from a sponsor this evening is Senate Bill 251 by Senator Lawson, an act relating to criminals, correctional institutions, station houses for women. Do we have Senator Lawson on the phone? Senator Lawson? Yep.
Thank you, Chairwoman Coyne, members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity to testify before you today. So this bill will provide feminine hygiene products for inmates. This is the current practice, and I'd like to enact that into law so for all future cases, regardless of who's in charge, that'll continue. And I'd also like to mention that 13 other states have a similar law, so we would be joining them. And I'd also like to mention that I have a bill similar to this that provides feminine hygiene products to K-12. And for the same rationale, I think this is important so that women are given the access to feminine hygiene products. There's a cost issue, and in prisons, there's added layers to that as well. So I think this is something that we should do here in Rhode Island. Although it's current practice, we should just make sure it becomes law.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. Do any of the committee members have any questions? No questions at this time. Thank you, Senator Lawson.
Thank you.
And our next bill that we will hear testimony on is Senate Bill 251 by Senator Lawson, an act relating to criminals, correctional institutions, station houses for women. I believe Craig O'Connor is on the line. Well, welcome, Craig.
Hello, Chairwoman Coyne?
Yes, you may begin your testimony.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, it's confusing. There's a lag online.
But thank you, Chairwoman Coyne, and members of the committee for allowing me to speak today. My name is Craig O'Connor. I'm with Planned Parenthood of Southern New England. We're the largest provider of sexual and reproductive health care here in Rhode Island. I've submitted written testimony in strong support of Senate Bill 251, Senator Lawson's bill. I'm not going to reiterate most of what I said in the written testimony. I just want to draw your attention. There's a wonderful report prepared by the ACLU, the National ACLU, that explains why ending period poverty is so important, especially in the correction system. I do want to say a quick word of thank you to the Department of Corrections. When a similar bill was heard in the House, I believe it was HHS committee, it came out that the Department of Corrections are already providing access to cost-free period products, which is an enlightened policy, which we really appreciate. This legislation would ensure that that policy continues under future administrators of the Department of Administration. So we hope to see that practice go forward. Yeah, I think that's about it. We really appreciate you taking my testimony, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much for your testimony tonight. Does anyone have any questions for Craig O'Connor at this time? Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chair.
That is our last witness for S-251. And the final bill is Senate Bill number 334. We do have our sponsor, Senator Quezada, here with us. Would you like to explain an act relating to elections, residents of those in Government Custody Act?
Thank you, Chairwoman. The reason of this bill is for a census matters. We just wanted every inmate to be counted where they're coming from. And I know this is just to start the conversation. I think it would be good so maybe we can make a study how that works. But I know it will affect other senator districts if they do that. But the reason of this bill is because in the census, most of those inmates come back to the community where they live, where they used to live before. Then the purpose of this bill is that when the census come around, that we can count them where they live. Then, thank you for the hearing, and I'm willing to answer any question anybody has.
Any questions for any committee members right now? Not at this time. Thank you, Senator. Thank you to all the sponsors for their testimony tonight. At this time, we will now take testimony from the public. For those members of the public who have signed up to testify, if you would kindly state the bill number you are testifying on, we would appreciate it. Let's see. And you have one more bill that you wanted to testify on, Mr. Brown. S-334, that's also Senator Quezada's bill, an act relating to elections, residents of those in Government Custody Act.
Yes, thank you. This is another bill that the ACLU strongly supports. Again, we have submitted written testimony that provides more detail about our support. I do know that there are other witnesses who will be speaking to express their support for the legislation, so I'll just be very brief and say this bill is designed to address this very serious problem of what's known as prison gerrymandering. Senator Quezada briefly explained it when she introduced the bill earlier on. It is an electoral issue that we think Rhode Island should join many other states in addressing to make sure that when lines are redrawn in areas where there are prisons in Cranston here in Rhode Island, people are represented fairly. And that's all this bill is designed to do, to ensure that district lines are fair and equal and promote the very basic goal of one person, one vote. With that, I'll be glad to answer questions about this bill.
Do any committee members have any questions of Steve at this time? I think we're all set. Thank you very much for your testimony on all the bills.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Horton, you're also signed up to testify on Senate Bill 334, which is the act relating to elections, residents of those in Government Custody Act. Would you like to testify on that bill too?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Senator Quezada, for submitting this legislation. In 2006, Open Doors led the statewide campaign to return the right to vote to thousands of people on probation and parole. And today, I would ask that you continue to strengthen our state's democracy by restoring equitable political representation to the people incarcerated at the ACI in Rhode Island. And I want to emphasize that this, the flaws in our current democracy touch everyone in the state. It's not just about people in Cranston, maybe versus people not in Cranston, or people in prison versus people not in prison, but our entire institution of democracy and the protocols and laws that make sure that it is fair and representative. We've seen so many places around the country over the past several years the ways that our democracy can be manipulated or distorted. Gerrymandering, extreme gerrymandering, for example, in Wisconsin has created a supermajority of House seats with only a minority of the vote. A clear indication that gerrymandering is harming the entire state democracy. This is another example, and I think that Rhode Island has really seen the sort of clear potential for problems that can occur even with such a small issue. And to remind you, what we're talking about right now would be the number of people that were in prison in the ACI in April 2020, which was only about 2,000 people. So we're talking about 2,000 people, the way they were counted in the census and the way they're apportioned. And while it will not have, for the most part, really a major effect in any upcoming elections or any redistricting, we can see how it could. And our state was given a really extreme example of this over the last several elections in the District 15 Cranston House races, when we saw, particularly in 2016, that election determined by less than 100 votes. And so those tiny margins determined the Speaker of the House and had huge impacts on the political power in all of Rhode Island. Yet District 15 was drawn in such a way that it included about 1,000 residents from the ACI, those held in the medium and women's facilities back in 2010. So about 8% of District 15 was incarcerated, could not vote, and was politically non-existent. So had the district been drawn to only include actual constituents, people that were actually part of the Cranston community, the outcome could have been different. And I'm not drawing any judgment about those outcomes, but certainly we could have ended up with a different person elected. We could have had a different speaker, and years of Rhode Island politics may have been different. So with the stakes that high for these elections, we need to make these decisions as a state through the clearest and most fair form of representative democracy. Instead, what we have is clearly a flawed system. A significant portion of the district could be disenfranchised, and certainly is not represented by a legislator who sees themselves as representing that community. And I think you'll hear today from a number of people who have been in prison and can speak to that and feel that they and their communities are being given short shrift by the way that this gerrymandering occurs. And so I understand that it is a hard issue to determine who represents the people in prison, but I think that as long as we continue to disenfranchise people and not allow them to vote while they're in prison, we should acknowledge that they are not equal members of our democracy while they are there, and that definitely counting them in the communities that they are from and they consider to be their own would be a fairer system.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Any questions for Mr. Horton from the committee members? I don't see any at this time. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And our last bill of this evening where we have public testimony is Senate Bill 334. We have 4 remaining witnesses. The first one is John Marion. Good evening, John. Welcome to the committee.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Happy to be here virtually. So I'm here to speak on behalf of S334, which would count folks who are incarcerated at the ACI for purposes of redistricting at their last known home address. You've heard or are going to hear from experts from the Prison Policy Initiative who can explain how this would be done. I just want to reiterate that Common Cause has supported this for almost a decade now. The Senate, when this was sponsored by Senator Metz, passed this bill on numerous occasions, and that now is really the most important time that you could pass this bill because the Assembly will be undertaking redistricting later this year after the census data are delivered to the state in September. 10 states have successfully adopted this, and several of them are implementing it this year. So we really think it's a great time to take this on because it would lead to a more equal representation for all Rhode Island communities. So I'll leave it at that because I know you have a long agenda, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions of this witness? Thank you very much for joining us. No questions at this time.
Yes, thank you so much.
Next witness is Alex Kajurta. I think I messed that up. Alec Kajurta?
Hello?
Yes, welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Madam
Could you
Chairwoman.
pronounce your last name for us, please?
Alex Kajurta.
Thank you. I messed that one up. Thank you very much. And welcome to the committee.
Thank you. So I'm the legal director of the Prison Policy Initiative, and we're a national nonprofit, nonpartisan research and policy organization. And I focus on how prison populations affect redistricting and work with states and local governments to address their problem when drawing districts that are based on census data, which counts incarcerated people as if they were residents of the location of the facility where they are on April 1st rather than at home. And part of the problem that we're trying to solve is that people who are incarcerated in many states, including in Rhode Island, legally remain residents of their home address. So you have a disconnect between the data that's used in redistricting and where people are residents for voting and representation purposes. So you would get counted in one district towards the district total, but you're actually represented by a representative and vote for a representative in a completely different district, which, because in Rhode Island, you have a lot of folks that are at the ACI that are either serving misdemeanor sentences or a pretrial. They're also eligible to vote and required to vote absentee ballot from their home address. So that's where they should be counted in the redistricting data so that it matches the constituents with the representatives so that everybody has equal access to government and everybody's represented by their home representative. And as folks before me have mentioned, we're up to 10 states now that have passed these laws. 2 states have implemented them already in the prior redistricting cycle. 7 states are starting their implementation this decade, and Illinois just passed theirs last week, and because of they have some particular circumstances that will require them to start their implementation next decade. But what Rhode Island can do is basically you take the data that you get from the Census Bureau and you take your data of home addresses from the Department of Corrections that they have on file, and you basically merge the two data sets so that you end up counting everybody at home in your redistricting data, and you adjust the data at the location of the facilities to take that population out. And I know there's been some concerns about the impact that this would have on funding, and this is something that comes up in a lot of states, and I think it's come up in the past in Rhode Island as well when these bills have come up. And the bill actually has language in it that prohibits its use, that prohibits using this data for distribution of state or federal aid. And I mean, honestly, even if that provision weren't in the bill, there's no process by which this data could be used to shift aid, because there's no aid that really uses redistricting data. You can think of it as, the Census Bureau sends the 50 states their own copy of this file, and whatever each state does to that file stays with the state. Anytime that population is pulled from the census to see, how many dollars you should give to a town for paving the roads or supporting their fire or anything like that, that population is always repulled straight from the census, or other population is used. For example, in school funding, you're looking at the number of pupils in school rather than just the total population and that sort of thing. So, I have experience with working with a number of states, and I can answer questions as to how this was implemented in New York and Maryland, or any other questions that may come up.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions of this witness? Okay, very good. We have no questions at this time. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Next witness is Michael Adams. Welcome, Mr. Adams.
Hi, how are you? Good evening, Madam Chair Coyne, and good evening to the rest of the members of the committee. My name is Michael Adams. I've been a Providence resident for my whole life, basically, and specifically the Silver Lake area. And I just wanted to, touch bases on the gerrymandering bill. This is actually my first time doing this, so I wrote down a little testimony. So I hope you guys don't mind if I read it, and I'll start it right now.
Very good.
My name is Michael Adams, and I have been a resident of the Silver Lake neighborhood of Providence for all of my life. Before this year, I was never aware of the impacts of prison-based gerrymandering on Rhode Island's state politics, but since learning more about it, I wanted to tell you how I feel. As someone who was formerly incarcerated and as a lifelong resident of Providence, I am frustrated because it feels like the urban community has been defrauded out of basic rights to equal representation. From a young age, my parents taught me the importance of voting and how our local representatives are supposed to honor and respect the needs of our citizens. So I always make sure to vote for people that will do the right thing. But when I vote, that vote isn't just for me. Each time I vote, it's for people of, my family, my friends, and, I have a kid. So every time I vote, I like to think of, it's not just for me. So being incarcerated, sometimes, I've been incarcerated before and had chances to vote, but my votes sometimes couldn't matter to the people that I want it to matter to. And learning about this law just gives me another reason to remember how important my vote is. When I couldn't vote anymore, that really upset me. When I got my vote back, I made sure to, use it the right way. I made sure to vote against Trump, and I made sure to learn about the local races I was voting on too. I knew there are a lot of ways America tells me over and over again that I don't matter, like the prison gerrymandering law, but I do matter, and my voice does matter, and that's why I'm here talking to you today. Voting is one of the concrete ways that average people like myself can advocate for positive changes in the lives of people we care about. My friends and I are very active in our community, volunteering our time to help others in need because we understand the destructive cycles that persist here. But volunteering can only do so much sometimes. voting allows me to have a say in choosing representatives that will unite to help us create a better future for Rhode Islanders. As representatives of the people, each and every one of you should want your constituents to feel equally heard in the same way. I urge all of you to the committee I urge all of you to commit to this small step to right the imbalances of our democracy. Thank you so much for dealing with me.
Mr.
Thank
Adams.
you to the committee members for your time, and thank you, Senator Quezada, for introducing this bill.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it. Yes, your vote definitely matters, and so doesn't your testimony before us. So thank you for taking time to testify tonight. Do any of the committee members have any questions of Mr. Adams at this time? We don't have any questions right now, but thank you for joining us, and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And our last witness this evening is Angel Turbides from Open Doors, a Rhode Island board member. Good evening and welcome to the committee.
Good evening. Thank you.
You may begin your testimony on Senate Bill 334.
Okay. My name is Angel Turbides, and growing up in Providence as an immigrant from Puerto Rico, I've seen how the same problems within low-income urban communities persist throughout generations. I come from a family where voting was not a high priority. Our biggest concern was how to make enough money to survive. I wasn't taught the importance of voting or how to research candidates and decide which one would best serve my community or fix the problems I saw around me. And when I spent time in the ACI, I found that the same was true for many men there. Most of the men I met at the ACI when I was there 5 years ago were from low-income neighborhoods within Providence and Pawtucket. Now, 5 years later, through my work as a board member at Open Doors, where formerly incarcerated people receive reentry services, I can see that this same pattern continues still. Most people in prison keep in contact with their friends and families while inside. And when they get out, they go back to those same places. That's what I did. Upon release from prison, people like me are then returned to places that again and again are denied an equal political voice. So even as we recognize our needs upon our return home, our communities don't have a fair say in choosing leaders who will address those needs. I was lucky to receive the social services that I needed in order to transition back into society and find a job after my stay at the ACI, but I know a lot of people who aren't as lucky. Maybe if my community had a fair say, we wouldn't be denied the help we need. Prison-based gerrymandering weakens the voice of communities that already struggle with high rates of incarcerated non-voters and a lack of civic participation. It's one more barrier on top of all the other barriers. Voter suppression laws that make it harder for people to vote, a public school system that's falling apart, poverty. I've come to see how together these forces all combine to work against my community in multiple ways. Still right now, I feel more hopeful than ever that change is on the way. Civic participation among people like me in Rhode Island is finally strengthening. People like me are seeking to make our voices heard. As this shift occurs, I want to know that my vote and the votes of my peers matter equally. And I can tell you for sure that the current law doesn't make any sense. When I was in prison, I did not feel as I was a part of the Cranston community. And I definitely did not feel represented by any politicians from Cranston. Passing this bill is the perfect next step because it evens out the playing field for everyone. It's not about Cranston versus Providence or Pawtucket. It's about making sure that all of Rhode Island has the democracy it deserves. If you're a legislator who does not represent a community that has a lot of people going to prison, you should still want to see this bill succeed. All of Rhode Island's representatives and senators should support the principle of equal political representation. and this bill can help finally make that a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do any committee members have any questions of this witness? We have no questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Turbides, for your testimony.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. So we'll revert back to the beginning of the agenda, to Senate Bill 59, an act relating to state affairs in government, statewide public safety computer-aided dispatch records management system by President Ruggiero. This establishes a statewide public safety computer-aided dispatch records management system. We did hear this last year, back in March, just the week before the shutdown of the state. So we'll continue that conversation. I believe we have the executive, the director of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association, Sid Wardell. Welcome to the committee, Sid.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome. Would you like to explain the bill?
Thank you for the
Yep.
So, I'm sorry that I had an echo there. I was trying to listen to two different committees at one time, unfortunately. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on Bill number 59, Senate Bill. As you stated, this was a bill that we went before the Senate last year. And in fact, we had worked out a number of technical things with the governor's office, Governor Raimondo's at the time. And we were ready to submit to you a sub-A. But for an overall, and Chief Mello is listed to come on the line as well and give you testimony. He is what would be, I would consider, the most thorough chief and having the most information on this bill. But just to give you an overview, we were about 4.5 years now proposing a way to have a records management system in Rhode Island which takes what we do now, and basically it's the same information that we were gathering now, but it's now in like silos. So if you picture that every department makes a car stop or has contact with somebody, that information stays within that department. It's accessible by other agencies, but for purposes of reviewing and trying to work with highway safety or any of the other stakeholders that we have, you can imagine how much work has to go into taking that data out to do any review on a statewide basis. So that's the back end of the system, but the front end of the system, which is it's known as CAD or community computer-aided dispatch. That's our dispatch systems. The funding for this, the idea is that the whole state of Rhode Island would be on the same dispatch system where the calls initiate, and that allows us to put all our resources that are out there, both police and fire, in one location for the purposes of responding to the needs of the public. So the good thing that I can tell you, the best thing about this, I think probably from many's perspective, is that the funding for this, we are not coming to the General Assembly or the Governor's office looking for funding. This is all monies that basically come out of what each agency is doing now individually to pay for the current records management and dispatch system that they have. So I know there's some concern we've heard in the past about, how much retention of data and how long it's retained. What I can tell you is now that's a policy that's dictated by the 39 cities and towns and state police and DEM and anybody else that may have a records management system. One of the things that this would put in place is that there would be policy that would be the same for all. So I think that's a positive thing for everybody. And as far as the funding source, as we had said, what comes out of that now is that each agency that's paying for their current services, as it's written in this, would go into a restricted account, which would then pay for the entire state implementation of the services. So that's just an overview of where we are. If there's somebody has any specific questions, but I know Chief Mello will be getting on to give in-depth testimony.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Sid. Do any committee members have any questions? Okay, Sid, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next up is Chief Edward Mello of the Jamestown Police Department. Welcome, Chief Mello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Welcome to the committee. Would you like to explain a little bit more about Senate Bill 59?
I will. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. You may proceed. We're having some technical difficulty.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to testify on the bill. As you mentioned earlier, this is a bill that you heard last year. As a reminder of the background of it, and I know that Sid covered a great deal of this, this is a project that the Police Chiefs Association has been pursuing for the better part of 4 years. This is a project which is fully funded in terms of the capital investment. We have secured grant funding for the entire purchase of the system. We have also calculated the annual cost in terms of maintenance and support. So every municipality, a law enforcement agency in Rhode Island currently pays basically 2 vendors in Rhode Island to be able to provide their independent autonomous records keeping system as well as the CAD systems to the total of more than $1 million. We would, through that restricted account that is part of the bill, we would contribute that to one repository with one system. The benefits on the front end in terms of the computer-aided dispatch system, in terms of resource allocation and availability, we covered that last year, but as a reminder, it gives you a common operating picture, if you will, commonly used in our terms, to see what resources are available throughout the state and be able to share resources, both police, fire, EMS, even rolling out to folks like DPWs, DOTs, when you talk about catastrophic events. So I know there was a couple of letters in terms of testimony that were submitted. I would like to reinforce the policy portion of the bill. So the bill reinforces that there would be an advisory committee to the director of DPS. This is modeled exactly after the FBI model. So they have, as you might imagine, a massive criminal justice information system in which they have police records, criminal records, fingerprint records, DNA, all sorts of records within their system. The model that the FBI follows is they have an advisory board, which is advised by a working group, kind of the people on the ground. That advisory board makes decisions and advises the director of the FBI about policy. And that policy, everyone that uses the system is held to that policy. So Sid alluded to this, that right now the policies are unique to every agency in terms of retention, what records are in there, how long they're kept, how we protect personal private information. This would allow for one central committee, one policy that would be applicable to all agencies involved. So this is a great opportunity for public safety, not just police, but fire, EMS, and rolling out all the way to all of our first responders, including public works folks, as we move along. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Do any committee members have any questions at this time? Chief, I don't see any questions at this time. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much. Take care.
You too. Next up is Stephen Brown of the ACLU of Rhode Island. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Brown. Welcome to the committee, Stephen Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. The ACLU has submitted fairly detailed written testimony on this. We do not include legislation. We do request a series of amendments. You've heard the explanation for having the system, and we don't question it. But we do think that it is important to include some very specific protections for privacy and civil liberties, which the legislation itself mentions and talks about being a priority, but we would feel a lot more comfortable if some of those protections were actually written into the law. The Chief mentioned the FBI standards that are out there for the federal database of criminal record information, and our written testimony makes a number of suggestions for incorporating a handful of some of those specific things directly into the bill itself to make sure that there's protection from the start for the privacy and civil liberties of all the residents of Rhode Island with all of the information that's going to be contained in what really will be a massive criminal justice database. So we hope that if the committee does look favorably towards passing this, that it will also consider amending the bill to address some of the issues that we've raised in our written testimony. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Do any of the members have any questions of Mr. Brown? Okay, we don't at this time, but what I'd like to do now is just mention Senate Bill number 134 by Senator De La Cruz. She was on earlier and had to go to another committee meeting. It's an act relating to criminal procedure, search warrants, electronic information, and data privacy act. It's a new bill, requires law enforcement agencies to obtain search warrants for electronic information, data, location information, and other identifying information of subscribers and customers except in specified circumstances. We'll hope to get Senator De La Cruz back on if we can before the end of this meeting, if she's finished with her committee. Thank you to the committee members for your attention tonight. That was the last of the public's testimony for this evening. If I could have a motion to adjourn. So moved by Senator Reptakis and seconded by...
Second by Senator Quezada.
Oh, thank you, Senator Quezada. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And we are adjourned for this evening. Thank you.